You're listening to the Beyond Mommy Dearest podcast, where we talk about growing up with narcissistic moms, how it shapes your nervous system, your relationships, and your sense of self, and how to heal without shame. I'm your host, Noelani Pearl Hernandez.
This episode is sponsored by the Happy Cannabis, body products designed to help you on your healing journey by supporting your nervous system with every application.
Trigger warning. This episode contains discussion of suicidal thought, self-harm ideation, sexual trauma, dissociation, and complex PTSD. Please listen with care and take breaks if you need to. Your safety and well-being matter. If you're in crisis or need immediate support, please contact a trusted mental health professional or the crisis resource in your area. Today I'm joined by Chris, a creator, coach, and advocate whose work has helped thousands of survivors better understand narcissistic parents, complex trauma, and the journey of healing. In this conversation, we explore emotional neglect, self-abandonment, healthy relationships, and why recovery is ultimately about rebuilding your relationship with yourself. Let's jump in. Chris, thank you so much and for being here. For those of you who didn't get to see what happened before record, Chris and I were just kind of warming up, shooting the shit. And we were talking about coming of age movies and, just really interesting things. I think one of the things that you find when you've been through severe trauma is revisiting a lot of things from your childhood are big. Like I was just talking about Care Bears with my husband, and my younger daughter said, "I'm Grumpy Bear. I want the little rain clouds on my tummy." And I started laughing. She's super sweet and so funny that whenever she says these like off the cuff things, it cracks me up. So she's all, I want to be Grumpy Bear. And I just did like a sticker for one of our clients that was like rainbow bright, calling somebody like mean words because they were like being mean to them. So I have an affinity for revisiting the 80s. I love it. So thank you so much for being here. And for people who are just discovering your work for the first time, I have to say y'all are in for a treat. Make sure you follow Chris. But can you introduce yourself a little bit and share what led you into creating this content around mental health and narcissistic abuse and complex trauma and all the things?
Yeah. So my name is Chris. I mean, it all kind of happened organically. I didn't really ever intend to be a social media creator for really anybody but myself. But, in my process of recovery, I began by having, and I saw some of the questions, so these are probably going to kind of intertwine, but I came to a place where I had gotten sober about a year in and trauma started really emerging. Like I was about 40 at that time. And so I hadn't really thought of that word much. I grew up kind of upper middle class. The parents divorced. When I took the ACEs score, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're like,
right. So, oh my God.
yeah."
Can you score that high? That's what I got.
Yeah, literally. But it was like, I'm a 6'4" white guy from the suburbs. That word. I was born in '78, so I'm not young anymore, and so that word just really wasn't applied for most of our lives, except in kind of very obvious and drastic circumstances. But our understanding of psychological trauma has grown, and so after getting sober, there's kind of this period where it's like, oh my God, I'm just not drinking and using drugs and everything is great. And this is all I got to do is like not drink, not use drugs. But for a lot of us, it doesn't work that way. Those have been obviously coping mechanisms have been, and although they're self-destructive, in many ways kind of kept this trauma storm at bay or relegated them to blackout behavior or whatever.
Right.
And so, I had kind of, I decided to quit my job and go into isolation and start healing. And I began, I'd been told about narcissism in 2004. I had a therapist give me the book Trapped in the Mirror and say, your dad sounds like a very obvious narcissist. And so I kind of began thinking along those lines over 20 years ago, but never really comprehended fully what it meant, didn't really even see it as a huge area of exploration, until I kind of watched the behaviors in the recovery process, to be completely honest. And so I had learned in rehab and through the recovery process the power of sharing stories and communal healing, of basically like, there's going to therapy and there's healing in a session with a therapist, and then there's going and kind of interacting with fellow survivors or fellow, whatever words you want to use. But there
Right.
was just real power in sharing stories, right? You'd look at like an
Right.
AA meeting, for instance, and there might be 5 people that talk, but there's like all these people that are there listening, and so there must be
Right.
some sort of value in just sharing stories. And so when I was kind of drowning in trauma and started to really understand how deeply repressed I was and how deeply mischaracterized the story had been, it was kind of coming out of COVID. I had never been on TikTok in my life. I just started yapping into TikTok like I was sharing. And it was
Right.
more for me. It was like
Right.
I
Right.
identified like the biggest effect of narcissistic parents is a lack of self, like a very
Yep.
shaky sense of self,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing ourselves. And so there was actual real value in just me seeing myself, hearing myself. But then it
Mm-hmm.
started to take off. Like I didn't, I remember getting 10,000 followers and thinking, holy shit, this is insane. And
Right.
that first account kind of got up to like 150, then it got banned
Oh,
because
wow.
I went at like a self-aware narcissist and kind of started a little beef.
Yeah.
But it just
Yeah.
happened organically. And
Yeah.
apparently I
Yeah.
still kind of struggle to understand what's special or why people find me interesting or what I'm saying. But, I just have tried to continue kind of having an authentic conversation around what it feels like, specifically for children of narcissists. I
Yeah.
had kind of recognized that like the conversation is so heavily centered around romantic relationships, and there's a
Yes.
good reason for that. But I thought as a child or an adult child even, like especially for the children trapped in it, no contact isn't an option, right? And so
Right.
all of the kind of
Exactly.
discussion seemed to be missing something, and I still think it kind of is. I mean, it's a very different experience to be raised by a narcissist than to be in a kind of romantic partnership with them, or all of the relationships we have. When it's your parent, it's really a
It's a mind
specific.
fuck.
It's a mind fuck, yeah. It's a
Yeah.
specific type of psychological torture that's going on at all times and is also invisible, and it's all we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to start talking about that and bringing awareness to it, but also heal myself. Like I wanted to create
Right.
community. Now I found after 5 years that like social media is difficult. It's easy to get followers and create like small
Mm-hmm.
C community, but it doesn't actually replicate real community, right?
Right.
Like I would run Discord meetings and group meetings and stuff
Right.
like that. But it was really just a desire, on one level to be seen and heard in my truth. I'd be lying if there wasn't a kind of aspect of me that wanted revenge on my family. That there was. I mean, I would be
Yep.
lying if I said there wasn't a component that I wanted to expose them. I
Mm-hmm.
remember. I mean, I was calling my dad an abuser online. I remember he worked with Peter Gabriel, and there was like a picture of them together, and I wrote West, my dad's name and this
Yeah.
guy's abuser.
Yeah.
So there was this, like, I was really,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
a lot of anger. I
Justice.
mean, the early
Yeah.
content was a lot of anger. It was me crying on camera, like
Yep.
expressing emotions on camera. What I was
Yep.
trying to do was model that, like, the path out of this in a lot of ways is feeling, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's not the
Yeah.
only path, but when we talk about a lack of self and we talk about authentic self, people will say, what does that even mean? How do I find myself? And it's actually through the expression of our feelings, right? Our thoughts too, but
Yeah.
but but but
Yeah.
mainly our feelings. And so it just kind of took off. And then people started asking me if I would speak to them in one-on-one settings. I kind of consulted some mental health professionals and asked,
Mm-hmm.
is this okay to do
Mm-hmm.
in a kind of coaching setting? They said, absolutely. I mean, I kind of
Mm-hmm.
look at it almost akin to like sponsoring an AA. I have a
Yeah.
really love-hate thing with AA. Like I find it
Yep.
to be kind of cultish, but I
Mm-hmm.
also recognize like it taught me a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it showed me connection. I mean, I'm weird. I loved rehab. I stayed in rehab for 3 months. I would
Yeah.
have stayed
Yeah.
there forever. But what I
Yeah.
realized was none of my family showed up. My dad, actually, it's kind
Yeah.
of funny, as narcissists do, went to Al-Anon after I got sober and detached with love after I got
Yeah.
sober because he didn't
Right.
want to have some of the conversations that were coming up. But just
Right.
learning like a sense of community through shared struggle was really integral in kind of shaping who I am and what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something definitely I think is a huge thing. I think the other thing in my experience with especially women, and I'll say this, and then I do want to like go into the male factor of this. With women is like there's this immediate connection
Mhm.
where because we're very relationship driven,
Mhm.
women are that like I can call on any of my sisters in healing who
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
know very little about except for this similar abuse, whether it's in a romantic relationship or a parental relationship, and say, "Hey, I'm dealing with this," and they understand.
Mhm.
I think the other thing that's really important when we talk about, you're showing your emotions, you're healing. I think that especially nowadays, there is this fake misnomer in regards to what male or the manosphere or any of those things is and what it really means to be a truly healed or enlightened or whatever it is male. And when it really comes down to it is that we put these two like thoughts in regards to what a male should be strong and they should take care of all these things, but then they can't be any of these things either.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what I've seen, especially for me, especially when I think about like my husband, I think about his family, who are my chosen family, is I see the balance of the two. There's a lot of
Mhm.
high emotional EQ. They can have an emotional conversation, whether it is that of, frustration or anger. And we can then come to a decision where that, like, I think I was just saying to him, I was like, my mom and dad didn't give me any ability to make a decision. So
Mhm.
when there is like this flood of decision making, no matter what it is, like I can make simple decisions. Like I can be
Mhm.
like, okay, this is what we're going to make for dinner tonight or whatever it is. But then if the kids are like, I don't want that, I'm like, on the
Mhm.
inside,
Mhm.
when I shouldn't be, I should be like, oh, sure. Well, what would you like to eat? Like
Mhm.
those kind of things, I think are really interesting and very, very maniacal when it comes to a narcissist because they make you unbearable
Mhm.
to other people so that
Mhm.
you have no other relationship except for the
Mhm.
relationship with them. And it's, oops, sorry.
Mhm. Thumbs
I'm
up.
giving myself a thumbs up. All right.
I'm all
It's
for
one of the
self-approval. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
one of the things that happens with my Mac. So I think and so my experience, like especially with my husband, we were having discussion about something last week, and I said to him, I said, "Hold on a second. I just realized something." I said, "Give me a second to process this." And I hate crying. And I'm going through perimenopause, so I cry all the time, but I hate crying.
I love
So I
crying, so
like
do it.
Okay, good. So I grabbed it, like I got it, and then like I just started crying. And I looked at him and I said, "That's so fucked up." Not anything he did. And he's all, "I know." And I said, "It's so fucked up that there is this bomb in my head that says that is something that's dangerous. I should continue to do that.
Mhm.
That is something that is going to ruin my life. I should continue to do it.
Mhm.
That is something that is going to make me unhealthy. I should continue to do it." And I was so irate with him. I was like, why? I don't fucking get why would any parent do that to their child?
Mhm.
And that's the mind fuck because I
Yeah.
have kids. That's the mind fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, consider for a moment that that's kind of what narcissistic parents do is they conflate
Mhm.
safety and danger in our unconscious, right? That like
Yeah. Yeah.
we're told everywhere that our parents are safe, that they love us, that whatever they're doing, they somewhere have our best interest in mind. And when we have narcissistic parents, that's simply not true. And so what
Mm-mm.
happens is we recognize danger as safety and safety as danger. There's
Yep.
also this no decision making thing. We're not given ownership over our lives. It goes
Mm-mm.
far beyond like
Yep.
not being able to make a decision. It's that they don't give us Bessel van der Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score, which I know
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
has
Yeah, I
people
have
have
it
kind
back
of
here, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
people have like kind of mellowed on it, but he talks about
Yeah.
this thing called the reflex of purpose, which
Mm-hmm.
is just this kind of inherent thing people have where they're reflexively acting in service of their own needs out of
Hmm.
some sort of self-interest. And I don't mean in a narcissistic way. I just mean
Yeah.
that like
Yeah.
our drive is
Yeah.
for us. It's like the
Yes.
homeostatic imperative. The
Right.
narcissistic parent, like our homeostatic imperative is managing them, not us.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
all of it becomes inverted, and that danger safety thing, we don't know what's dangerous. We don't
No.
have a nervous system that recognizes danger. In
No.
fact, we have a nervous
No.
system that kind of like
Loves
recognizes.
it.
Yeah. I mean,
We love it.
we do. I mean, this is a big thing in relationships. I
Hmm.
think when we have to kind of go
Yeah.
out and learn to have healthy relationships is,
Hmm.
can we tolerate a boring relationship, because healthy relationships are kind of boring,
Right.
right?
Well, and
Like,
that's the crazy thing. Like I think about, of course, I had a narcissistic ex-husband.
mhm,
Um, in regards to my first relationship, of course, when he asked me unreasonable things, I was like, okay,
mhm,
like of course. Whereas with my husband, who I love dearly, he like is my total safety. People would think that we have a boring life.
yeah.
Like the people would think that, right? And for him, like he's like this incredibly handsome man. He's very tall, very sweet, all the things. And people think like we're just going and gallivanting everywhere. I'm like, no. Like our idea of something that is amazing is like come home after our, leave our desk after we work, sit on sit on the couch, chit chat a little bit, maybe game a little bit, talk, have the kids come in. We like watch my youngest is on this whole Mapperton kick, which is like this woman who is the wife of the Earl of Sandwich. And which I was
I
like, the
want to
Earl,
be the
really?
Earl of Sandwich.
I was like, okay. And we watch their renovations
Yeah, yeah,
of all of their castles,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like that's what we dig on. And people might think that that's boring, but for me, that's literally all I want. All I want is to be at home. I want to work. I want to drive my 2 miles to pick up my kids. I want my food delivered. That's it. I don't want
It's
anything else.
beautiful. It's beautiful. I
But
mean, when I hear that,
yeah.
I hear safety. Like it's just,
Yes.
that it's what the end goal isn't one specific form or other, but it's
Mm-mm.
safety. It's
Yeah.
contentment. It's
Yeah.
being able to kind of
Yeah.
relax in the
Yes.
relationship space. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like talking to people in
Hmm.
times of struggles, is really rewarding and fulfilling, but it's
Right.
always really like I tear up when I hear people's stories of
Yeah.
just achieving normalcy, because
Right.
it's something that like
Yeah.
narcissistic parents, like I don't want to say there's such subtleties to it
Hmm.
that we don't really understand it or see it, and therefore seeing how it's done differently also becomes elusive. And it's really
Hmm.
like I think a lot about the difference between like healing in like healing spaces, and then what
Hmm.
you're just describing, which is healing
Hmm.
actually in life, right? And the acceptance
Yes.
of what that looks like, which is like, I mean, I used to be in bars most of my life and
Yeah.
partying, and
Yeah. Hmm.
that was my role in my family, was scapegoat party guy. But I
Hmm.
was slowly killing myself, and it should have been
Right.
obvious to everybody that this was not partying.
Right.
But in my life now, it is. Yeah, it's very simple. It's very kind
Right.
of sitting around reading a book, playing a video
Yeah.
game, watching a
Yeah.
movie,
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
okay, right? And being kind of
Right.
just like um happy, or at least
Right.
opening the door for potential happiness.
Right. Our contentness. I mean, I think that's, one of the things that my husband and I have been together for 11 years now. One of the things that I I talk about are that, and I talk about this with clients and whatnot, is like you said earlier, we have been conditioned to like it's a high conflict
Mhm,
all the time, high conflict. And the work outside of the work that I do with the narcissist relationship recovery coaching is we work with organizations where everything's always high conflict.
mhm,
Like we do high conflict mediation with employees, or we work with executive directors and their board, and we're always pulled into like coaching or performance improvement plans. So I get my shot of dopamine in
mhm.
regards to the high conflict that way. I just don't want it when I come home.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's not.
yeah, yeah.
I want to rest. I want to relax. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the work and your content and the things that you talk about is, besides this honesty that I think is really important for men and young boys who are becoming men
Mhm,
to see, is the emotion. that, like you said, I love crying. I actually do like crying because it's like a wash over the system.
Yeah.
But I always hate it when I'm like trying to say something and I start to
Yeah.
cry. But I
Yeah.
think it's really important for people to see that. And
Mhm.
you talk about mental health, um, or like little mental injuries or mental injuries that are really rooted in
Mhm.
trauma. Can you explain a little bit about what's meant by that and
Yeah.
why that
Yeah.
distinction is important?
Yeah, so I'm an English major, right? So language
Mhm.
is interesting to me, the power of language. And
Yes.
so when we're talking about kind of metaphysical issues or things that don't have a material correlate in reality, the
Hmm.
language we use really matters. And so
Yes.
I'm somebody that believes all of the language we have around mental health is wrong, period.
Hmm. Hmm.
That when we talk about mental illness, and then we start to bring trauma into the chat, what we're
Hmm.
talking about is more mental injuries. Now, there are
Hmm.
illnesses of the brain, right, which
Hmm.
create mental health issues, but we're living in a world that's deeply abusive, right? And so
Yes.
if I walked out into the world and somebody hit me in the arm with a hammer and broke my arm, and then I walked into a hospital and they told me I was sick and started talking about bone density, I'd call them
Right.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so
Right.
we have structures of our lives that are leading. And again, like I'm not speaking about, I don't want to
Yeah.
paint this with
Yeah.
too broad
Yeah. Yeah.
of a
Yeah.
brush, but when we talk about depression or anxiety, a lot of these things are rooted in complex trauma. That's what we're coming
Hmm.
to understand. I mean, our awareness
Yes.
of physical trauma is there, but our awareness of what psychological trauma might look like isn't
Right.
there. Our ability to spot it a lot of times isn't there because there's, for instance, like there's a lot of trauma with narcissistic parents in what doesn't happen, right?
Right.
Not the
Right.
stuff we look at that does, but like
Right.
neglect,
Hmm.
self-abandonment, the
Right.
kind of like subtle unconscious stuff that they're doing. And
Right.
so when we start to factor trauma in, I think mental injury is a more accurate term. And I also think it helps us because I think a lot of the language we have around mental health is driven by the pharmaceutical industries or
Yes.
various things that have ulterior motives involved, which again, this isn't to get into some economic,
Yeah.
bullshit, who
Yeah.
cares?
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
but the illness model just doesn't sit right with me, right? And then you start looking at,
Hmm.
like, when we talk of illness, we're also talking of health, right? To define an
Yes.
illness is also to define health. And so
Yes.
when I look at mental health and mental illness, the natural question is, well, how are we defining health here? Right?
Right.
What is mentally healthy? And when you look at the DSM, what kind of
Hmm.
like pushes things over the top is your productivity within our economic system. And so
Right.
it's not the kind of experience of consciousness itself. It's the expectations and norms of the culture. And that
Right.
mental health and the way it's interpreted is cultural, not the experience we're having,
Right.
but the interpretation and the language around it. And so we have a culture, that wants to ignore trauma or has intentionally
Yes.
ignored trauma for a long time. If you look at post World War II, for instance, there was a
Hmm.
lot of work done on PTSD in soldiers that was basically brushed under the rug, right? Because it's
Yes.
like, especially with men, well, you're just not tough enough, this, that, and the other thing. But then you start to kind of dig into these things and really see that, like, when we talk about decolonizing or kind
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
moving beyond our cultural conditioning, and seeing things a little bit more clearly, to me, like deconstructing the language, the perspective around mental health and mental illness is really important. Reframing it, because,
Hmm.
say we're struggling with something, and then we go to see a therapist and we're diagnosed with an illness. Does that language really help us to feel like we're sick for struggling with the world? Or, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it
Yeah.
does for some, but it seems to be self-serving in a certain way for the industry and for the culture to ignore trauma. And I want to bring it to the forefront. And I think that small linguistic difference helps us, number one, not personalize it so much. I
Hmm.
mean, like not let the diagnosis become our
Yeah.
identity, but
Yep.
also it's just true. I mean, I really believe a lot of these things are mental injuries, and we can get into genetics, but even so, like
Hmm.
that genetic whatever probably entered through trauma at a different point in our lineage,
Yeah.
right?
I
I
mean, we
mean,
talk about it, right? We talk about in the Native American culture, and I'm not an expert in Native American cultures. But one of the things that I know that they talk about is my mother's injury is my injury, or my grandmother's injury is my mother's injury, is my mother's injury is mine. And we talk about it a lot in generational cycle breakers. I think about my mom.
Mhm.
My mom immigrated from the Philippines, which is often used on me to say, oh, she's just your mom. She didn't know any better. And I was like, a mother is a mother in all cultures. Like a mother is we don't even need to speak the same language. For example, my grandmother, my grandmother-in-law speaks English, but she is old enough to decide what language she wants to speak, which is Spanish. She deserves it. She raised 6 kids, a bunch of grandkids. So she speaks mainly Spanish. I speak very little Spanish, but when she first met my daughter, knew how to be a mom. My daughter was upset. My husband and I were just beginning to date. We've been together for about a year, and she was meeting them for the first time at Thanksgiving. And my grandmother-in-law saw that my daughter was upset, and she came in. She said in Spanish, "Oh my gosh, you look so much like your mom." She said, "Come here, mija, come here, daughter," and gave her a hug. And my daughter just melted right into her.
Beautiful.
And that they didn't speak the same language.
Yeah,
I
but I
mean,
mean,
and that's the
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. And
Like
talking
your
about
mom,
language, I mean, with
yeah,
narcissistic mothers, I'm always saying like narcissists don't live up to the linguistic definitions of the words that describe them. And so it's like parent
right,
or mother.
right,
What you're describing is the thing that we assume a mother would have that
right.
narcissistic mothers don't, which is a
No,
connection to their children.
right.
Natural. Not all women have natural maternal urges, but
No,
I
no,
don't want
no.
to speak with
My
a broad
grandmother
brush, but
does,
it's like,
like, and that's also, this is the picture of her being just amazing. And that
mhm,
I think is a really important thing because she sets the tone for the entire family.
mhm,
And I think for a lot of women, for me as a daughter of a narcissistic mother, I didn't know exactly how to mother
mhm,
because that example wasn't there. And I know for her mother, who lived with us for a very short period of time, she was very motherly.
mhm,
And my mother took advantage of that system. There's Social Security and all that kind of stuff that she did. I have no idea. I was a child when it was going on. But I do know that she treated my grandmother very similarly to the way she treated me. We were
mhm,
objects in whatever we
mhm,
needed for
mhm,
her story, for whatever it is. And I find it really interesting because um I mentioned to you that I had Doug Bugle on one of the podcasts who was in the Narcissist
mhm,
Playbook. And when he described the abuse of the narcissist, and his narcissist was a romantic relationship, his ex-wife, it was very similar to the abuse that I experienced, which I could guess, and I probably could take a bet out on Kalshi to say that the abuse was probably similar to the abuse that you experienced
mhm,
as well,
mhm,
because there's this isolation that happens, right?
mhm,
I chose to self isolate. Like, I
mhm,
love being in my house, and like, there is 2 points of entry into our house. I know where they are, and the safety is there for me. And that I think is that for especially any time of trauma, abuse, recovery, are survivors that they really value
mhm,
whatever it is. And to go back to your mental injury, I think that's one of the things I want to say on that is what I see in what I see in really good therapists is therapists who create in their head, and maybe they don't tell their client, but create in their head that this is the timeline of when someone's going to graduate.
mhm,
That it's not a continued thing. It's very similar to I broke my arm.
mhm,
It's going to take 6 weeks for it to whatever. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how long it takes. But with a mental injury, with equating it to a broken heart or whatever it is,
mhm,
that there's a time limit. That
mhm,
there has been a very an idea that people need to keep going to therapy all the time, and I think that is a disservice to people,
mhm,
and that you are feeding into the narcissist like inability for this person to make their own decisions. Now,
mhm,
are there people who need that? I definitely. I don't disagree with that at all. And I think that, like you said, when you look at somebody in the disability community, they always say, I am a person with this, because
Mhm.
they don't want to become that
I'm not
disability.
this. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's really an important thing, and something that is important for therapists to start really thinking about. And then for the last point that I was thinking was, therapists that are open to working with coaches like us, I think is a really important thing, because they're two totally different things, right?
Mhm.
While we dabble in the family system because we understand it as a result of being who we are and the traumas that we've experienced, we can talk on some of it. Whereas a therapist works deeply in the family system, they take you through the trauma, all that stuff. We're very future forward,
Mhm.
right? Where a coach is saying, okay, you might have a rough week this week. Let's work on this and get through it. And I'll see you next week. And those two, like, we're on the same track, we're working on the same trains, we're
Mhm.
moving together. I think that is a really important thing for for people who are looking for what works best in healing for
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah,
That's huge.
yeah.
And support groups and various other things. Like,
We have
it's
this
not just
huge
one.
toolbox, yeah, and like people
Yeah.
should be willing to utilize whatever tools work for them. I think,
Yeah.
to your point, like I heard somebody say once, a good therapist should be trying to lose their clients.
Yes.
Like,
I say the same
and
thing
I
about
think
me. Yeah.
I think, I mean, for me, I was like kind of taught just to go to therapy, right? Like, I mean,
Right. Right.
my family system pawned, my mom still does this. Like, tell your therapist. It's like, no, you're my mom. What do you mean? I'm
Yeah. Yes. Oh my
telling
gosh.
you.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
like, there is this idea, of becoming dependent on the therapist in ways that
Right.
I don't think is healthy. I mean, in my
Mm-mm.
coaching business, I do a lot of listening. I see my job almost
Yeah.
more as
Yeah.
like witnessing, but like, I don't want clients to be dependent on me in a certain way,
Yes.
right? That
Yes.
like, ultimately, especially when we're dealing with recovering from narcissistic parents or a narcissistic relationship, we're the goal is self-determination. And so
Mm-hmm.
any external focus of control that we're relying on, we have
Mm-hmm.
to be really careful that we're not bypassing our own responsibility, right? Our own
Yes.
our own cultivation of control over our lives. This can be hard. I'm always talking about this pivot in narcissistic abuse recovery between what was done to us and
Mm-hmm.
what it means for us, right? Because we
Yes.
we get addicted to the narcissist stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where the healing becomes all about the narcissist, and it has to
Mm-hmm.
become about us. But we can
Yes.
kind of project that kind of narcissistic control onto a lot of people, especially for those of us who are raised by them. The
Mm-hmm.
real goal is not asking other people, but telling ourselves in a certain way.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
I see like the role of a coach or a therapist as a vehicle. Like my
Yes.
my dad was a follower of this guy Swami Rama, who is
Mm-hmm.
not a good man. He was kind of
Mm-hmm.
famous in the
Mm-hmm.
70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good
Yeah. Yeah.
man, but
Yeah. Yeah.
he
Yeah.
said he would say stuff that sounded pretty good. But one of the
Yeah.
things he said is like the guru, and this could kind of be like a therapist or a coach, is like a boat, and you use it to get from one side of the river to the other, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't take it with you, right? And you
Right.
don't you,
Mm-mm.
you don't need the boat to walk on
Right.
land, basically. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, to me, like, ultimately, like, even validation can become an addiction. That so much
Yeah.
of this is just about us being self-contained human beings, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
enough
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves. I firmly believe that
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic abuse recovery is not actually about repairing your relationship to the narcissist. That's
No.
impossible. It's about
No.
repairing your relationship to self,
Yes.
right?
A
That
hundred
that it's
percent.
it is about how and it's also narcissist armor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody falls for narcissists,
No.
and so part
No.
of what I think the variable is our relationship to ourself, our sense of
Mm-hmm.
self, right? And obviously our various
100%.
parts of, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons why people repetitively find themselves in relationships with narcissists, but ultimately, like, we have to understand, like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but the path we're walking is our own, and we can listen to
Yes.
people who have studied it academically. We can listen to people who have gone through it experientially, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, we find ourselves alone in a jungle, hacking ourselves, hacking our way
Yeah.
through it. And that's the
Yeah.
point, right? That it's
Yeah.
our life. It's our life. It's
Yeah.
not the narcissist's life. It's not
Right.
whoever's life. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually ours.
Mm-hmm.
And accepting the struggle, accepting our own imperfections, and loving ourselves through it, to me, is actually the goal.
Yep.
As long as we're kind of reclaiming our internal lives and our external behaviors, um, then we're on the right path. But part of that is
Yeah.
imperfection. Part of that is falling on our face
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
saying, well, yeah, guess what? I just fell on my face. I'm going to get up and do it again, and nobody can
Yeah.
stop me.
Yeah. I mean, and that I think that in my experience is a really important thing, because there is not anybody who's 100% all the time.
Mhm.
It is not humanly possible. And knowing what you like, if you think about, so our oldest is my daughter, and my youngest is my husband's, one of the three that my husband had with his first relationship. The two of them are exactly similar. Like, I think in some other lifetime they probably were sisters and they found each
Mhm.
other again, in this lifetime. But the two of them know what they like. We always say, they know what they like what they like, and that you're never going to change that. So if you ask them to do something and it's not something that feels right to them, they'll say no, no, thank you. And that is something that a narcissistic parent has, like, literally, physically, possibly, but emotionally has beaten out of their kids,
Mhm.
is to say
Mhm.
no.
Mhm.
And that's one of the biggest tools that I really work on with people, is to
Mhm.
say, you can say no. You don't have to do everything. And you can practice saying no to certain
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
Just start to practice saying
Start
no.
small. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It could be, no, I don't want those mashed potatoes. Those
Yeah,
look
no,
gross. They're
exactly,
too lumpy,
exactly.
right?
I mean, looking at it like a practice, like if I were to
Yeah.
start, like I'm going to start learning to play basketball, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to go start with layups, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to
Exactly.
start like shooting half quarters or 3-pointers. I'm going to
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
with layups, and we have to be willing. I mean, this is what I tell people a lot, is like we have to be willing to admit we are learning something new. And it
Right.
sucks because a lot of these things, when we're dealing with narcissistic parents, are things that feel like entitlements to human beings, that feel like
Yeah.
everybody just got them by osmosis, but we didn't.
Right.
And that's
Right.
okay, right? It starts with, but we have to actually accept imperfection in the process of learning and
Right.
practicing, right? And I
Right.
always say it's not a light switch what we're doing. We don't turn these
Right.
things on and off. We
Yep.
gradually try new things. We gradually kind of put ourselves in
Mhm.
different like situations, and slowly our kind of like menu of possible responses or possible behavior starts to expand. And to me, that's when the trauma starts to dissipate, is
Yep.
in the expansion of possibility as to how we might engage with the world.
Well, and a lot of survivors normalize that emotional neglect,
Mhm.
because it's all that they ever known. And we kind of talked about that. We talked about, ACEs, and both of us jokingly said, like, my score is off the charts. I remember when I was doing it in my college course, and my professors are like, we're going to just do this because, ACEs was just starting to
Mhm.
get big. And they're like, normally a normal person would have between this. And I was like, ooh, that is not what I have. And
No,
they're
no.
like, who scored between this and this? And, everybody raised their hand. And then they're like, did anybody score above this? And I like raised my hand. She's like, okay, well, why don't we chat after?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and that, I think, for a lot of students that are going through, college or grad school, and they're going and taking a psychology class, there's this phenomenon that happens, that a new psychology student, someone who's taking psychology 101, will be like, oh, I have that disorder. Oh, I have that. Oh, I have that. Because you see it. And, you know, if we're talking about the DSM, there has to, you have to meet so many criteria to be that.
Mhm.
So you're totally normal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And you're good. People who have experienced this kind of abuse, like, are score off the chart. And I
Mhm.
think that for some people, they don't see it until they start to have their adult relationships.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, how does this kind of childhood emotional neglect start to show up in those in adulthood and in those adult relationships? How are you seeing them in your clients?
Well, I think with narcissistic parents, chronic self-abandonment is the best kind of single
Mm,
sentence description I can give, which is just
mhm,
that can be people pleasing, that can, but I think what we see is just like people that like a narcissistic parent essentially puts a filter over our consciousness
Mm-hmm.
through
Mm-hmm.
which all external expressions pass
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a split second unconsciously. But is this safe to say? Right? Is this safe to feel? Is this safe to show the world? And so inevitably, nothing is safe to show a narcissist. They're narcissists. They're incredibly dangerous people. And so how this shows up in our lives, I mean, it's kind of the flip side of you talking about teaching people to say no, is people like abandoning, contorting, destroying themselves in hopes to remain connected to other people. The irony being they're probably trying to connect to people that aren't connectable to, right? Like, I mean, this is the child. I always say it's like you've got a light socket with no electricity. And so the child keeps trying to stick it, get the electricity. They go over to this other one. And so the child's adapting their behavior, trying to connect to the parent, not realizing it's the parent that has the problem. There's no electricity running through it. There's never going to be a connection, but we don't know that. And so what it programs us to do is to chase after everybody in our lives, like specifically, like if we're talking about, somebody comes to me and they say, oh, I've just ended up in 5 relationships in a row with a narcissist. And so I say, okay, so we're going to start talking about your family, right? We're going to start talking about your parents, because when we have a narcissistic parent, we're confronted with a narcissist way before we're psychologically ready. We're confronted with them the minute, actually in the womb. I mean, I think narcissistic mothers affect their children in the womb. A narcissistic dad puts the mother in so much stress that it affects the children. And so the children have literally been dealing with this psychological terrorist since before they were born. And so what does the child do, right? What options does the child have? Can a 10-year-old say, you know what, I'm setting my boundaries and I'm leaving you? Absolutely not. Even if they could, they wouldn't, because the child is programmed to meet this type of abuse by chasing it, right? Instead of walking away. And so that pattern gets deeply ingrained into our consciousness, and we go out and repeat it. And so these are the patterns that we have to be willing. I mean, again, this is where it kind of almost feels unfair, because it's actually about destroying ourselves to rebuild ourselves in a certain way, right? But it takes this like vicious honesty with ourselves and this ability to kind of really look at how we're showing up, not just in our romantic relationships. This goes for job interviews. This goes for
everything.
Literally. I couldn't. I mean, partially I realized I'm autistic, so this kind of also goes for job interviews where I didn't make good eye contact. But it's like I couldn't write, like when I was 18. My house had burned down when I was 16. I lost everything I owned. I was already traumatized. And so time comes to like fill out college applications. I literally couldn't do it. I still can't do like resumes or like anything that's kind of asking me to sell myself. I have a really hard time. So, you talk about no decision making. So what did my mom do? She filled out all of my college applications, declared that I couldn't stay in the state and that I'd be going to the University of Iowa. And so I was traumatized, not ready. Right. And 3 years in, I totally failed out. And now it's like, oh my God, you're a total failure. But it's like, I didn't sign up for this.
Well, and I think that, it's such an interesting thing, because it's like they just want to be able to say, oh, my kid went off to blah, blah,
That's
blah,
all
and
it
they're
was.
going to graduate. And it's like, I remember, so I went to Santa Clara University, all brute force. I had my daughter when I was young. I was like, I know I have to go to the university, get a bachelor's degree to be able to make decent amount of money for us to survive. So I knew that part of it. And I knew I didn't want to live with my mom, because my mom was a freaking psychopath. So I was like, okay. And my dad was not an option. He lived up in Oregon. I'm down in the Bay Area. I, wanted to stay here. I was going to show them. So I went to school, and my mom said my last quarter, I'm so proud of you. And this is before I went no contact. I'm so proud of you. I want to pay for your last quarter. And I was like, okay, because that saves me some money. She didn't pay for it. That's the first thing. But she told everyone that she did pay for it. And then when it came time for me to get my diploma, they're like, oh, hey, by the way, you still have a bill, so we're not going to send it to you. And I was like, what? And when I called, she's like, oh, I didn't pay for it. I was like, what? like they, and when you say it out loud, you're like,
it's never not shocking. Like it's always like a similar story. Like they're but it's always just like how
like, why
how and why are you like this? Like,
right. Yeah. And that's a crazy thing. Like, and I don't know if my daughter's talking to her right now. Based on the conversations or the voicemails that my mom leaves, I don't think they're talking to each other, because my daughter has her own relationship with her. And I've told my daughter, you can't control that.
Mhm.
Like there is no control. And I said, I love you. And the only reason why she has a relationship with you is because she's trying to keep tabs on me.
Mhm.
She doesn't care about you. I can't express that enough.
Mhm.
Like, and I know that this is hard to grasp as a child.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, she's 30, but as a child, it's hard to grasp. And I remember her crying at like 7 saying, all grandma is doing is talking mess about you, talking
Mhm.
about how you're a horrible mom and how you do this and how you do
Mhm.
that. And it's like, this is what they do.
Mhm.
This is what they do. And I can't express that enough. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if my mom knew my husband's number, she probably would be calling him.
Mhm.
If my mom knew my address, she probably would show up here,
Mhm.
and that's not something that I've ever shared with her because I say this, but I don't say it lightly. She would destroy me if she knew,
Mhm. Mhm.
because that is whatever her programming is. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is to destroy me.
I, I I believe narcissistic mothers specifically want to destroy their children. Like
It's
I
crazy.
really believe that like there's resentments from what it does to their body during the pregnancy,
Yep.
but also, and this goes for both men
Yep.
and women, like
Yep.
I think narcissists are deeply triggered by having children. That the
Yes.
narcissism, having these little things because they don't see them as humans that
Nope.
constantly need stuff from them,
Yeah.
is like the most triggering thing for them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
literally incompatible. When I say they don't live up to words, like parent, when you say parent and it's a narcissist, they're not doing the things, they don't have the assumptions
No.
that come with it. But I think there is this like this urge to destroy. I mean, it's like The Sopranos, where Olivia literally
Yeah.
tries to
Yeah.
kill Tony,
Yeah. I mean,
and
nobody gets that. Like, I
yeah.
don't like it.
Well, it
Nobody
sounds
gets it. Like,
dramatic. I mean, it sounds
yeah.
outrageous. Like it would sound to
Yeah.
somebody that's not well versed in dark personality types, it would sound
They wouldn't get
insane.
it. Well, and
Um,
that's the thing, I think about like I think about my mom, and when she talks about like my birth, she's like, you destroyed exactly what you said. You destroyed my body and blah, 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 and all this stuff. I'm like, how could I have done that?
Yeah.
I
See,
was a child. I
I
was a
was a home
baby.
birth, and there
Yeah.
are all these pictures of my mother, and they
Oh,
almost seem like inappropriate, right? Like the
yes.
gaze of the camera. I don't know who's
Yeah.
taking the pictures, but like my birth was about her, her
Yeah.
body
Yeah.
basically. And again,
Yeah.
maybe I'm
Yeah.
reading that wrong, but it always kind of felt like this
Yeah.
very strange thing.
Well, yeah. It's so funny because I just think my dad, like, I love my dad to death. I think maybe he's just after being with narcissists for so long, and he had a stroke about 25 years ago. So I think there's
Mhm.
just something, that's going on with him. But when my dad has recounted the birth story, and I think some of this, the reason why he says it like this is because the abuse from my mom. He says, your mom was in labor for 48 hours. I was like, damn, that's a long time, right?
Mhm.
Thinking,
Yeah.
okay. And the doctor said to me, we're not going to be able to get her out because I have like really wide shoulders.
Mhm.
We're not going to be able to get her out because her shoulders are too wide. So we need to take your wife back for a C-section. And we don't know if we can save both of them.
Mhm.
What do you want us to do? And my dad said, save my wife first. I was like, you said what? like, why would you
And why are
do
you
that?
telling me this?
It's so like I can't
Yeah.
express that. And
Yeah.
I think it's just like, and when I think about it, I think about, well, yeah, because if he was retelling the story, my mom was around,
Mhm.
they were together for, I
Yeah.
think they were
Yeah.
married for like 11, 12 years. Then of
But
course
it
he's going to
speaks
say
to
it
the
like that.
brainwashing of the
Yes.
narcissist,
Yeah.
how that narcissistic
Yeah.
introject, where we are thinking through their homeostasis,
Yes. Yeah.
our life is to kind of preserve their life, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just like, why would you ever say that? Like,
Yeah.
why? Like,
How does it feel saying that out loud?
it's
How does that hit?
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've said it out loud like 3 or 4 times, but like it really, like, and when this airs, it's like, it's to me, it's crazy. Like, when I say some of the things, and you've probably experienced this, and I'm sure our clients have experienced it. When we say some of the things that our parents have done, It is so insane. Like, it's so crazy that it's like it's a movie.
It doesn't, it
Like,
like
it
literally
doesn't,
doesn't
right,
compute for people, right? Like, and
right.
sometimes their mind will come up with some sort of finessing of
Yeah,
it, other than
yeah,
these are just disordered human beings. Like when I talked about
yeah,
my house being burning down,
yeah.
part of the problem was, so I'm 16, my
Yeah.
house burns down, I lose everything I own. My
Which is
dad
so
had
sad.
just built a massive house 5 minutes from my mom's. He didn't ask us to live with him. So I lived in a hotel I was like Dylan McKay. I was living in a hotel by myself at like 16. What do you think? I got in trouble? Yeah, of course I got in trouble, which
Yeah, of
led to like
course you
quitting
would.
basketball, which led to
Yeah.
all of this stuff. Well, Chris is just a drug addict. It's like, no, I'm traumatized. But like, think
Yeah.
of it. Like the house burns
Yeah.
down. And then we're in the condo. So residence in condo for a year, finally get
Okay.
back into the house. My mother has always been like, your dad doesn't do enough. Your dad doesn't do enough. So once we got back into the house, she decided to search my room, found a bong, and then kicked me out of the house we had just gotten back into, forced me to go live with my dad, who didn't want me when the house burned down, who literally said, like, this isn't your house. We don't want you here. Right. And so like, then they wonder why I'm catatonic when I'm trying to go to college.
Yeah.
Like where is a
Like,
sane
where is
adult?
it? Well,
Right,
and
right, right.
that's
Well,
the
and they
thing.
they treated
Like,
it like, oh, did you don't think you burned the house down, did you? Because it was kind of, I mean, I didn't take it on as my fault, but it was like, my mom always wanted me to do man stuff. Nobody ever taught me, so she had me like change the battery in a riding lawnmower. That the lawnmower did start the fire, but they were so concerned. I blame myself. I didn't blame myself. The trauma was that I lost everything I owned,
yeah. Yeah.
connecting to childhood, and was already like a very shaky, kind
Yeah.
of kid
Yeah.
in identity
Yeah.
ones. But yeah,
No, that
this is
wasn't
what
your
happens in
fault.
narcissistic
Yeah.
families, is that like anything that could go traumatic becomes traumatic, right? Because trauma is
Yes.
not the event itself. So kids with healthy
Yeah.
family systems can go through stuff that might seem like it should be traumatic, but not emerge with a trauma profile.
Right.
Whereas the
Right.
children of narcissists are alone in literally everything. They're alone in their own
Yeah.
reality. So there's the trauma of that, right?
Mhm.
The baseline trauma.
Yeah.
But then anything that goes wrong becomes traumatic, because
Yes. Everything.
there's
Yeah.
not only no support system, there's just no acknowledgement of the child's reality, of their emotional
Right.
state, of what's
Nothing.
actually happening internally to the child. When you said that about college and my mom, yeah, she would have felt bad with all of her North Shore Nancy friends
Yes.
and sisters if she had an 18-year-old that didn't go to a school, and then she sent me to a Big Ten school. When it's like,
It's
what I
so ridiculous.
what I needed was like real help, like
Yes.
understanding
Yeah.
my ADHD, understanding trauma,
A hundred
understanding.
percent.
I've always been really smart, but I've never, I could get by in school, but
Yeah.
like I can't study. And so I needed
Right.
help learning to study, learning to manage,
Right.
all of these.
All of the things that normal parents help their kids do.
Yeah, then you get
Like,
there and your
that's
friends, yeah, your friends have like learning disability, like
yeah.
exceptions and all this stuff. And this was
Yeah.
like the late 90s. So
Yeah.
that stuff was kind of emerging. But like when
Yeah.
I look back, knowing now what I know about my neurodivergence and my
Yes.
actual profile, there was no like accommodations made other than you're a fuck up and do better, and
Which
like,
is so crazy to me because all it would have taken was a 504. That's all it would have taken. And you would have gotten a little bit more time. They
mhm,
would have sat with you. There's all these things that make these things a little bit easier. And you were saying, like, it was really interesting because my husband and I had this discussion because we live in California. The price of housing here is out of control. Like, we live in the Bay Area, it's crazy. And so one of the things we've talked about is having, like, my 30-year-old, he's got an older daughter who is 23, 24, having them live with us for a short period of time, having them save up their money in order to
mhm,
do things.
mhm,
And that would be a full house. But of course, we're like, yeah,
mhm,
like, of course, come on over. We're always like, come over and get food. Like, fill up on, we're going to meal prep, fill up on your
mhm.
food for the week in
Be a
order for
family.
them to save money.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, like, family, that community, all of that is so important. And that's something that narcissists, like, hate. They hate it. I think some of it is because it shines a light on what a piece of crap they are, but it so, like,
Well, it's the
you know?
triggering of the children too. Like my mom just wanted me
Yep.
the fuck out of the house. Like she kept
Yeah.
saying, I need a break. I need a break, a break. I'm your kid.
You
what do
had
you?
you had a
And I was kind
child.
of a
Like,
wild kid. I will say, like I was a fairly wild
no
kid.
matter,
But like,
no matter how wild you are, like my whole thing is this. It doesn't matter how wild you are as a child. Your parents made the decision to have you, whether
yeah,
it was like, oh, it's a surprise, or I'm going to work on trying to have you. They're your kid forever.
mhm.
Like I'm going to be 90 years old on my deathbed, and my kid is my kid. Like I look at, there was a story of the lead singer of Coldplay. I can't remember his last name. I
Chris
remember his first
Martin,
name,
Chris
Yeah,
Martin, I think. Yeah,
Chris
yeah.
Martin, and he was talking about how he had done a song with Dick Van Dyke. And Dick Van
Mhm.
Dyke is like 100 years old, like literally, he's 100 years old. And his son, who's 70, was asking his dad, Dick, a question. And Chris was talking about watching them, the interface between them. And I just saw like a little kid walk up to his dad, say, hey, I wanted to turn on this light. Is that going to mess up the shot? And his dad was like, no, go ahead and turn it on. And the experience, it's a 70-year-old talking to like a 100-year-old.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that was
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
70-year-old knows whether or not to turn off the light, but there was a respect there was a love there. And
Mhm.
that I think is when I think of anything, I know I'm always going to have that with my daughter and my kids. I know that is something that's going to happen. They're always going to be my kids. But I'm like that. I think about my mom going through death because I'm an only child alone, basically.
Mhm.
And I think about like even like me and experiencing that. And that's something I think for a lot of people is a really hard thing
Yeah.
because when you dip back into it, we talk about, oftentimes people ask me, well, how do you get through like that jump to be like, okay, she's going to be alone, nobody's going to take care of her. I'm like, well, I mean, that's kind of how I lived my life with her.
Mhm.
And it's not a tit for tat, but like I am not the kind of person who is going to go through that kind of torture,
Mhm.
especially if there's any like memory issues or anything like that at the end of her life, to just be tortured again. Like that
You
would be
destroy
horrible.
yourself. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that would
It
be
would undo
horrible.
all of the work you've done. And I think
Yeah.
that question is so present for those of
Mhm,
us,
mhm.
with narcissistic parents of what to
Yep.
do. But to me, I look at it as like a test of the
Mhm.
work we've done.
Yeah.
That like the people pleaser, the unhealed person would go do it and they would be
Yes.
destroyed by it, right?
Yeah.
Because like it
Yeah.
wouldn't go the way they want it. They would end
Mhm,
up getting pulled. I look at like I look at like these family systems like a planet and we're living in their
mhm,
atmosphere. And so
mhm.
the atmosphere is poisoning us basically.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
we leave the atmosphere, anger or defiance, whatever kind of propels us out of the family system into space, which has its own challenges, but we
Mhm.
can't go back into the poison, right?
Nope. I
We
can't.
can't like it. I'm dealing with this now actually, where
Mhm,
I see my mind slipping back into those roles, slipping back into
mhm,
this
mhm,
feelings of helplessness, of powerlessness,
mhm,
of a previous version of myself that I was compelled to play.
mhm.
And we have to really like guard ourselves in a lot of ways
Yes.
and think of these things. I don't want to say coldly, but truthfully, right? I mean, for me,
Yes.
like my dad is a little different. Like he never yells. His wife is malignant and he'll be really cruel on her bidding, but
Mhm,
it's all neglect with him. It's all just he
mhm,
doesn't care. It's emotional
mhm,
regulation.
mhm,
But 5 years out from not seeing or talking to him, I'm reverting back into this idealized form of him. I recognize this.
mhm.
Like I'm having to kind of remind myself of what it was actually like. It helps to retell some of these stories
Yes.
because it's subtle. Like this whole not living with him thing. It's what he didn't do, right? It
Right.
wasn't him. And this repeated itself. Like there was all sorts of different abandonments, but it's carrying a memory of what it was really like. For a lot of people it's so bad that there's just no going back, but there's
Right.
also a lot of flavors of narcissism. And so
Yes.
our mind can kind of play tricks on us in a certain way. And I think and getting back to what we were talking about with the kind of death moment or the end of
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
we really have to understand what it will do to us to go back into that relationship and just, I would never tell anybody what to do. Each one of these, we all have our own decisions to make.
Right.
But what that particular one requires of us is brutal honesty with ourselves and forgiving ourselves if we decide that we can't be a part of it. Like there will be guilt and shame
That's okay.
triggers, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's acknowledging them and saying like, I can't, and there's no reason why I should. They didn't honor me as their child at any point in my life. I mean, you were talking about that moment between the Van Dykes, and my brain was just thinking like, wouldn't it be nice to experience that just once, just this like safety, these like painfully normal moments, right? But like just this interchange of genuine concern where you don't feel like an imposition or a burden, and there's just this like healthy like I mean, to them that's like a nothing exchange. If we pointed out the significance of that, they'd be like, oh, it is beautiful. It is, and I'm so happy for you with your children. It's like getting to kind of, you had mentioned like you didn't know how to parent because your mom didn't teach you. You also knew what not to do in a lot of ways,
which
right?
is really important.
And so there is wisdom if we start from knowing what not to do. We're probably starting from a pretty good place because avoiding those pitfalls, and then you're a beautiful human being, letting your own humanity kind of guide you in those things, right? It is the vibe. I mean, I think, when you talked about your daughter and her relationship to your mother, I always find it interesting how to approach those topics with the kids, right? Like, I mean, a lot of people come to me asking, like, how do we, I guess this is more parents, but grandparents too. It's like, how do we protect the kids? And it's always kind of
hard.
It's hard. I always kind of give an answer that's not always satisfactory. Is we can help build up their sense of self and then also support them with the reality that this is their relationship to manage. And unfortunately, when it's with a disordered person, it's going to come with some pain. But ultimately, especially with the children, like, if you're co-parenting with a narcissist, there's a certain level where the kids are going to have to make sense of it at some point on their own.
100%.
All we can do is love them and create spaces for them to be themselves. But it's there is, if a narcissist is in the family mix, each person is going to have to figure out how to deal with it, in their own way. We're lucky if we have siblings or people that can understand and join us in a kind of cohesive front. But in my experience, it usually that's a luxury in this scenario. That a lot of times it's everybody kind of retreats into their own corners. The siblings can struggle to get along.
Well, and that is purposeful, right? It causes triangulation for a very purposeful reason. I think, there's a lot of, when it comes to my daughter, our oldest, like, I have to say, I appreciate who she is because she's very clear about her boundaries. She knows the things that drain her, the things that are important. She's amazing. She's done a great job in regards to that. And I think, when we talk about DNA and things coming down from, mother to our grandmother and mother to child, there's a lot of work that we have done together to break those cycles. The cup that, my mom's mom had that might have been all the way full is like barely full based on, my daughter. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I have had to create boundaries with her in regards to the conversations about my mom, where we've had to have real dark conversations to say, please do not share anything in regards to me, my husband, the kids, things that are important to me, that to her, because that will be the first thing that she starts to target. And, she's been pretty good about that. She said one time, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you should really call grandma. And that was when I had to, put my mom voice on and say, no, I'm not going to do it. And, I have a very strong sense of like justice when it comes to things. It's a very black or white thinking. Either, you're in my crew or you're not. Like I always joke with
Mhm.
my kids. My daughter, if she's not talking to one of her friends, I'm like, okay, we're riding at dawn. Are we talking
I was
to
going to
them
say
or are we
ride or
not?
die. Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
if she breaks up with someone, I'm like, that fool, right? Like
Yeah.
there,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
part
We
of
all
it.
need that actually.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, and it's an important thing, and and that's for all of our kids. I appreciate all of those things, and I think the thing that is really, really, really important in regards to my daughter, I think for me, in regards to my husband and his healing, is just that accountability of okay, this is who we are,
Mhm.
and being really, really self aware in the healing process of wherever we are. So I think that, for you, when I hear you talk about, the experiences that you've experienced, I hear that accountability come up again too. So I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts about how accountability and self awareness play in
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so for me, like until I got rid of all my drug problems, none of this would have been possible, right? And so everything that's happened since then was a result of me taking accountability for the various ways I was destroying my own life, regardless of whether it was rooted in trauma or, whatever the backstory is. It didn't matter at that point. I mean, one of the
Mhm,
questions you sent me was like, what was this point of where I
mhm,
knew I
mhm,
had to heal? And so this can kind of like be the same. And so my stepfather was diagnosed with dementia. My mother
mhm,
decided to leave him. My
mhm.
divorce trauma like went crazy,
Bubbled
right?
up.
And so my
Mhm,
drug use and my alcohol use got really out of control.
mhm, mhm,
And I was sitting here talking to a friend of mine, a long time friend, and he started talking about trigger warning committing suicide, right? That he was
mm,
having those feelings. And I didn't tell him not to. I said, I want to too.
mm.
And 3 days later he jumped off a bridge. And
Ugh.
so like I was confronted with the
Mm,
reality of of my life, and that like from the outside it looked like I was partying all the time,
mhm.
and I
Yeah,
was. But
yeah.
on the inside, like there had been the
Mm,
entire time, like when I went to college, my mom forced me to college. I started throwing up stomach acid, having panic attacks every day.
mhm,
There had
mhm,
been this
mhm,
internal life that nobody had seen.
mhm.
And when my friend made that decision, number one, it like broke my heart. Obviously,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
never felt like responsible in the way that like there was anything I could do, but I sure as shit like wished I had said something different. And so I was confronted with this choice of continuing down this path, which, I was doing hard drugs. It wasn't just like smoking pot, like
Mhm,
like it was like pretty much anything, and so I was confronted with like mortality, like real question of do I want to
mhm,
continue this?
mhm,
And I decided I did, but I made this point to myself that I would live my life the way I wanted to live it if I chose to stay here. And so I had to convince my family I needed rehab, which should have been obvious. I mean, I was in the
mhm,
emergency room for
mhm,
something happened. I put a specific substance in my nose and it closed
mhm,
my nasal cavity. But I had to
mhm,
convince them I had to go to rehab. None of them showed up.
mhm,
But what I learned is like it was that accountability that allowed me to kind of turn the mirror back on my family system, that without
mhm,
me getting healthy. That's what's ironic. When I said my dad went to Al-Anon after I got sober, he did. Like he
mhm,
didn't go to rehab, he didn't participate in therapy ever. There was never any
mhm,
sort of like healthy conversations around my experience. But then because I wanted to talk about things, he went to Al-Anon as though he was the victim of my sobriety. He had to be
mhm,
convinced I had to go. And so I heard from my sister, this is the narcissistic kind of inversion. She said, if you decide you can't have us in your life, we'll accept that with love. And I'm going, but I just like spent 3 months in rehab, like walked away from this. I need you now more than ever. But at that point, the accountability was then putting boundaries up around them and realizing
mhm,
like I have to I have to do this on my own. There were other incidents that are really scary and difficult to talk about where I learned accountability
mhm,
through
mhm, mhm,
neglect.
mhm,
I dealt with a lot of ideation, and I've
mhm,
realized I've deconstructed the ideation of the
mhm,
children of narcissists. And so what I've come to is half of it is like, will somebody look at me? Like it's this endpoint of not being seen. And it's also this kind of weird conditioned response that's unemotional, where we've been convinced in an unconscious level that we're always the problem. Therefore, our mind will come up with the solution of subtracting ourselves from the equation. But making a conscious choice to be accountable for my life was the most transformational thing I ever did. And there's been immense amounts of struggle since then, but it's mine, right? It's
Yeah.
my struggle to live a life that is mine. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but the
No, I think
other two
that,
things,
yeah.
it's like accountability or not account like, and this kind of related, you mentioned earlier about like masculinity, red pilling, and what it means to be a man. And two words are what have guided me, which is authenticity and vulnerability. And I think that that's what men need more of, actually. And that
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it's not one state of being or the other. It's the ability to feel our feelings and to exist. And that was really where I became accountable as well, was not just in the kind of external substance abuse stuff, but accountable for my feelings, accountable for my rage, for my anger,
Right.
right?
Right.
Accountable for this pit of sadness and grief, and
Mm-hmm.
not run from them, not continue to push them down. And I think when I think of what it means to be a man, I think there are like healthy masculine traits, whatever, however we want to culturally to decide, define them. But like, I really think men are human beings just like women, and that
Yes.
what we
Yes.
need to be is just authentically ourselves, which
Mm-hmm.
includes our feelings. Now, for
Yeah.
some people, that's going to be a problem because they're authentically assholes, but it's like, um,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
but like if there's a chance, I mean, I really like Bell Hooks's work around male trauma, and that it's an acknowledgement of what's been taken from us by patriarchy hurts men too, and it's
Yeah.
really our ability to be vulnerable and to be authentic. We go out into the world and we put a mask on. I'm a 6'4", blah 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 blah, and I'm gonna be an ass kicker or whatever. No, it's really about like making space for our own traumas, for our own complexities, and not like rolling around in them or like remaining stuck, but healthily acknowledging our own humanity so that it doesn't hurt other people. Because if you
Yeah.
ask me what's driving all of this bullshit with men, it's their unhealed trauma and their
Yeah.
inability to look at themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean, I think that like we just watched the 60 Minutes last night and like I was like, really? They were talking, not 60 Minutes was a bad thing, but the story was about, this influencer. I think that social media feeds into it. Like there's a lot of great stuff about social media, but I also think that social media feeds into like
Mhm.
what a man needs to be and he needs to be this. And no, I think that this authenticity and that vulnerability is really important because you can't be someone else. Like I can't be someone else. I can't be, a supermodel. I can't be an actress. I can only be who I am right now. And that to me is a really important thing. And I think for a lot of kids who grow up in narcissistic family systems, in a mother, and especially a mother and a daughter, they're like, you don't know who you are.
No, no.
That you never do.
Yeah.
And, it's so crazy. I can't remember who it was my husband. We were talking about um, my mom and it was early in our relationship. And I said something like to be shocking. I said something um, along the lines of, one of the best things I think that would happen for my mom would be if I died.
Mhm.
The victim complex that she could like play on
Mhm.
on that. And my husband's all, yeah, that would be like her, piece of the resistance. That would
Yeah.
be it. Like, and I was like, fuck that. I'm not doing that. Fuck
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah.
that's not happening. And I think for a lot of narcissistic parents, that is what it is. And it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts,
Yeah.
with your
Yeah.
addiction. Your mom, like, oh, poor me, my son's a drug addict. No,
Yeah.
where are you in that whole
Right.
scheme of things?
Right.
Go help your son.
Right.
Like,
Right. Right. Yeah.
hello.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, those two words, like, are essentially like the opposite of narcissism, right? Authenticity and vulnerability are the
Oh
opposite.
yeah.
They cannot be
Yes.
authentic and they cannot be vulnerable. That it's a compensatory defensive mechanism
Yeah.
against their authentic self, which is basically a chaotic blob. But yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's learning to be ourselves and accept ourselves for children of narcissists is exactly where it's at,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that
It's the
like
medicine.
they do want us dead. I've been saying that for a
Yeah.
while, that like
Yeah.
a dead, they want a sick scapegoat or a dead scapegoat, right? And
Yes.
what they don't want is a
Yes.
healed scapegoat.
Right.
Um,
And those are the things that like I think about my mom taking me to the doctor, making me sick, trying to start that with my daughter because it was easy. It was
mhm,
easy. And she played the, oh, I'm an immigrant. I don't understand what you're saying. Of course I'm going to give my daughter medicine that she needs, or of course I'm going to create this sickness. And I think that, like you said, a child who's sick, a child who's dead, God, that's a perfect storyline for them
mhm,
like
mhm,
that. Like they're like, all right, let's go, right? And they can put up 1,000 GoFundMe pages.
mhm.
They can act like they're a broken person. And to me that is so like, I think that losing a child, thinking about losing a child, any of those things is like that's a piece of your soul that's
Mhm.
missing, like for a parent. And I don't like that. It doesn't compute to me that someone would, as a parent, be like, that's exactly what I want. That's crazy to me. Like anytime I
Mhm.
think about that in regards to my mom,
Mhm.
it's crazy. And you know, one of the things I was talking to my husband about is, this is exhausting. Being a healed person is like exhausting. The healing process is exhausting,
Mhm.
and but the recovery on the other side is really a beautiful thing. And so I often close a lot of my podcasts with, what would you want to say to someone who is just understanding that they have a narcissistic parent? But I think I want to go a little bit deeper with you is, what would you say to someone who feels that exhaustion by the healing
Mhm.
process or is afraid to never fully heal? What would you say to them about that?
Well, I would reframe it in that like there is no destination to healing, that the
Hmm.
healing is a process, that it's an
Hmm.
engagement with our suffering. It's also an engagement with our transcendence, right? And that
Hmm.
when we think of healed as the goal, I think it becomes elusive in a certain way, and we get exhausted because it seems like we're never reaching it, right? But the
Hmm.
world doesn't stop coming at us. So I always describe
Mm-mm.
healing as like you're climbing up an icy mountain with a Yeti throwing ice balls at you at the top.
That's great. Yeah.
And you have to learn to dodge the ice balls and keep climbing, knowing that you're probably not going to get to the top, that there really
Hmm.
is no top, that life is difficult. And
Yeah.
we've made it double difficult because of the lack of safety within our parental relationships, because of the
Hmm.
ways that the narcissistic parent has distorted our interface with reality, basically, with
Hmm.
reality, with ourselves, with other people. And that, it's okay to be exhausted. It's okay to take breaks.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay to just say, you know what, today I'm going to go eat fucking ice cream all day and I don't care,
And I'm gonna watch Real Housewives of Rhode
right, right.
Island.
I'm
Like
going to do
that.
the things that make me me, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
like healing, like, I don't want to say it can't become our identity, but it really can't. It has to be, the healing has to be building, it's
Mhm.
destroying and creating, right? But the
Yep.
healing, when it's like when you put your finger at it, it moves. And so when we name it as
Yeah.
healing,
Yeah.
I don't even like the word healing anymore. I like
Yeah.
living.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to
Yes.
live. We're trying to live.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
exhaustion you're feeling is most likely a sign that you're doing something right. And
Right.
what it means is
Yes.
you need rest. And so the healing in that moment is, guess what? Giving yourself rest. We deny
Yep.
ourselves rest. And so
Yeah.
I feel exhausted all the time. Like I feel
Yes.
like every day I'm like, what has
What
become of my
happened?
life?
Yeah.
Right.
What just
But then I
happened?
have to remember where I came from. Like what was
Yes.
what is the alternate path that I would have been on? I'd probably be dead.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Hmm.
don't say that lightly, just that like
Right.
fentanyl enters the chat and like
Yeah.
off I
There's a
go,
whole. Yeah.
like, and so, if you're feeling like exhausted, if you're feeling like you can't do it, you can. Like it's that we have to reframe, redefine it again with language. We have to find language that empowers us.
Yes.
Right. And so if we're feeling that we're exhausted, name why we are exhausted, because
Yeah.
we've been fighting a battle for our entire lives.
Right.
And a lot of us, for me, I tell myself this body I feel is because number one, I'm old now. But number two, like the goal was to drop back into the body. That's what everybody says, right? Is to kind of like we dissociate from body into mind. And the goal is to start feeling, well, this is what it feels like. It feels fucking exhausting.
Yes, exactly. I laugh because I'm pushing 50. I'll be 50 next year. And, my body has been through 50 years of traumatic abuse by a parental figure that is supposed to give you life. And as soon as I was born, she started taking that life away. And that I think is a really important thing. Chris, thank you so, so much. I know like we only hit like 2 or 3 of the questions that I had up, but I think that the conversation is an important one to have. And of course, I'm going to have you back. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity and your honesty in regards to this. I think that it is important for people to understand that healing doesn't look the same for everyone. And that's okay.
And it's not unicorns and rainbows, right? It's
not.
It's the opposite. Right?
No. Yeah, it's totally it's farts and shit. That's what I would say. And that's the thing, I think that for people to think that they're going to come off on the other side after healing from a narcissistic parent, I wasn't going to be a 115-pound supermodel. Like it just wasn't in the books, and that's okay. It's okay.
We still have problems. They're just our problems, right?
Yes, exactly.
We still have to live life. We just don't have to have this ball and chain around our leg, holding us back. But yeah, it's to me like the Buddhists have a saying, and joyful participation in the sadness of life. I think they said that in The Sopranos. But like, it's an acknowledgement of that. Like, life includes suffering. Every life.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean the suffering is all, not at all.
No,
it means that through the acceptance of some suffering, we open ourselves up for some transcendence. If we resist the suffering, we suffer twice, right? And then it becomes, and so, healing is, to me, like I said, it's an engagement with life. It's a process. It's not a destination.
100%. And I think on that note, we close up shop. And thank you again. I appreciate you.
So thank you to Chris for sharing his story, insight, and honesty with our community.
Healing from a narcissistic mother is real, possible, and you never have to do it with shame. I'm your host, Noelani Pearl Hernandez, and until next time, take gentle care of yourself.
Your skin is a part of your nervous system, and taking care of it is essential to overall balance. Our products are specifically formulated to nourish your skin and bring it closer to homeostasis with every use. Start feeling better in your body today with the Happy Cannabis.